And of course, to interview her would be our lovely founder, Saran.
Hi, Anil. How's it going?
It's good.
It's good?
Yeah. Obviously, we got to work on our marketing and messaging so people remember Stack Overflow. But other than that,
it's great, especially because we had the after party there yesterday.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
yeah, you definitely got to work on that.
It's good people there.
Yeah, cool. So this is Anil. Y'all know Anil, right? I think y'all know Anil. Can we give a big round of applause for Anil for just being here? So awesome. So awesome.
I like these folks already.
They're awesome.
Yeah,
they're really great.
I'm in. I'm sold.
They're a great group. So today we're going to talk about a bunch of things.
Okay.
A lot of stuff.
Let's do it.
I think the big one, though, the one I really want to start with, is your Twitter followers. Because
what about them?
I don't know if you know this, but he has over 630,000 Twitter followers. So the burning question, I think, is, how did you do that?
They're bots. I bought them.
You
No, it's kind of a trick. So if you want to get a big following on Twitter, I would suggest starting like 10 years ago. So it's like step one. No, I was early. I knew the folks that founded Twitter before they started. When they were doing their old projects like Blogger and things like that. And it was a small scene, and it was like this project they were working on, and I joined. I think the day Twitter launched. They were like, you should check this thing out. And just took to it because I had been blogging for years before that, and it was a natural medium. And I think literally they were like, if we think this guy's funny, we'll put him on this list. And it was one of those things where you signed up. This is back when like Ashton Kutcher would go on CNN saying like, I'm going to get 1 million followers on Twitter. And when you signed up, it would suggest people to follow, and I was on that list.
Wow. And
so, and it wasn't right away. Like at first I had like whatever, a couple thousand followers, which was great. I was excited. And then I went to coffee with a friend, and I came back and I had email notifications on for like adding a new follower, and I came back and it was just like my phone had exploded. I thought there was like a bug or something, or like they made a mistake, and it was I'd gotten added to this list, and as everybody signed up, they would sort of add me, and it taught me a lot about like that's literally the old boys network, right? Was like I had known these guys and they hooked me up, and it became a thing that becomes like a credential when I come here. But it wasn't like, I'm good at Twitter, but it wasn't on merit. I'm not better than people, better at Twitter than people that have fewer followers. And it was very instructive about how social platforms, social networks work. Is this like, if you set the defaults, you control the whole thing. If you have the power to choose who's the winners and losers, it affects the whole network. And so it was it was fun. It's fun to be able to mess around with that stuff, but it was very sobering. It's just like, this is a lot of power and no rubric for how it's done. It was just the switch somebody flipped because they thought this one tweet was funny.
Yeah. Well, what I appreciate about you and the way you use that platform is you could have used that to just self-promote and kind of just make
dumb
jokes.
Yep, my mixtape's on SoundCloud now. So.
But you use it for good. Like you actually talk about real issues and diversity and inclusion and community, but also ethics and tech. How do you decide what you talk about?
I wish I had a rubric for it. It's more of like combination of ADHD and compulsion. Is like, how do I get like these things out of my head that are buzzing around in my head? And literally, I actually had this conversation the other day with a friend who's like, an investor, and like he's very successful, and he's like, how do you do all this tweeting while you're doing your work? And I was like, I do that so I can do my work. Because if something is like bugging me or like somebody is wrong on the internet, then I have to go and be like, yeah, exactly. Like, let me go fix this. And it's just like, and then it's sort of like that it just scratched. Like I could file that away for a little bit and focus on the work. And that it is an interesting balance to strike because, on our team at Fog Creek and the people working on Glitch, like, a number of them follow me on Twitter. And I always feel like they're going to be like, we were in the middle of a meeting and you were doing what? And I'm like, I'm not justifying that. I'm not advocating that. I'm just like, this is my own issue, but like, let's work it out. Like, here's where we're at.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your kind of, is it still recent? Can we call it like a year, 2 years?
Yeah, it's been a little over a year.
A little over a year. Congratulations on your 1 year. What's that like? What's it like being CEO of this huge company that so many people?
Well, what's interesting, so a little bit of background. So Fog Creek is an independent, privately held tech company, which is a thing that used to exist. The company's never taken venture capital. Our co-founders are Joel Spolsky, who a lot of people know from Joel and Software. Back in the day, he'd write that blog, and Michael Pryor, who is a little less public, but no less brilliant, and had been the CEO of Trello until they sold to Atlassian a year ago. And they really had a vision of a place that took care of its people. And I was like, I was a working coder in, this sounds like 100 years ago. In the last century, it's true, it was 1999. I was working, and I read Joel's blog, and he was talking about we should take software seriously, and we should empower the people that create technology, and they should have good tools to work with. And I mean, it's wild now, like GitHub's here, but like he was like, well, you should use version control. Like that was an idea that people were like, really? Like I shouldn't just like have a zip file on my desktop? Like, wow, that's great. But like him advocating for that really helped. Joel advocating for that really helped. And so I just remember, like, I was working and I just saw this person saying, take this stuff seriously and be thoughtful about it. And it was a very humanist idea. Like, it was really about respecting people. And honestly, like, my lens on it was he was advocating for workers. He was like, you have to take seriously the work people are doing and give them the tools to support the resources they need. That, I mean, and it's funny to say now where, like, coders are among the most in-demand, workers in the history of the world now. But like 20 years ago, to be like, this is something that's important to business, important to society, and take seriously, was a radical idea. And then they built a company around that. And I just was like, that's amazing. And there was also a tinge, which I think a lot of people have sort of carried forward, and you've seen some of the like thoughtful criticisms of Stack Overflow these days of like, this was the highest technical bar you had to pass. Like, I never applied to Fog Creek because I was like, I wouldn't get in as a coder. I'm not a good enough coder, and I'm intimidated by this whiteboard test and whatever. And we don't do any of that stuff anymore, to be clear. But that was the moment. Those were bugs that had to be fixed, but it was something where I was like, well, I could never work there, but it would be so cool if I could.
One day.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, for real. And then, we stayed in touch. I remember sitting down with the team when they were working on what would become Stack Overflow and brainstorming names. It was actually, Microsoft did an event doing outreach to open source developers in, I want to say 2007 or so. And this is back when like open source people were like, yeah, I don't mess with Microsoft. And we were just sitting out in the hallway brainstorming names, and that was where the name for Stack Overflow came. And I sort of stayed in touch, and when they decided to really spin the company out and make it big, they asked me to join the board, and I'm still on the board of Stack Overflow. And so we kept in touch that way, and then I got to see as the Fog Creek team made Trello, and that grew up and spun out what they were doing. And I just thought, well, people talk about like the PayPal mafia, right? And I don't know, you could probably guess how I feel about that. But the idea of like a group of people that can keep being creative and having ideas that are being successful. And this team and this ethos of this community in a far more inclusive way and a far less likely to create people like Peter Thiel way has been able to make hits, hit after hit, right? And we can talk about, like, there are things we could have done better, but you look at Stack Overflow and it has opened doors for people. You look at Trello and it has made people more productive, and you look at, I think what we're doing with Glitch is every bit as ambitious and, worthwhile as those things. And how do you build a culture that can make those kinds of things over and over and over? That's something that's very special and rare, and especially to do it in New York. I think that's very special and rare. I think to do it, and each time the teams have gotten more diverse and more inclusive, and we've sort of, we still have a lot of work to do, but we've done more to sort of open the doors. I think that iteration on who we are and getting better, that was what drew me in. And so, like I said, about a year and a half ago, to be approached and say, do you want to come in and run this place? And what had happened was Joel went to be CEO of Stack Overflow, and Michael went to be CEO of Trello, and they were like, who's going to run the mothership as we spin these things out? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like that was intimidating. I was really like, I think pretty highly of myself, and I'm like, I don't know, like, I don't know if I'm good at that. And I saw what was going to become Glitch. Like, I saw the prototype, and I just thought, yeah, I'm in. Like, I want to be part of that. I think that's going to matter.
So before we dig into Glitch, I want to touch on something that you said earlier, which is that Fog Creek was known as this place that really took the workers seriously and respected them. So when I think about coders now and the issues we talk about, we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, we talk about work-life balance, we talk about documentation and empathy and feelings. Back then, what were the issues? What did it mean?
That's a great question. So setting the context here, you go back 15 and 20 years ago, and there were some of the functional things. So like you talk about, you need to use version control, and you need to have tests that run, and then like the build has to work every day, and like it was a very like desktop software oriented business. I mean, Fog Creek started with like selling software on CDs that it shipped to people. Like, we're an old company, and so there was that functional stuff, and then there was respecting work hours. Like people are not, expected to go to be working 24/7 and to be reachable 24/7. There was a lot around. For example, at Fog Creek, nobody's ever paid for their healthcare. We cover 100% of costs, and we've always covered 100% of costs.
Happy people right here.
Yeah.
Future job applicants.
Yeah. No, and we're hiring. And I mean, there's so many parts of it. And even in our headquarters, every coder has always had an office with the door that closes.
Amen.
Yeah, and which is like, I'm like, well, that was really, I was like, I got to get better at coding because I wouldn't mind having an office. No, and actually, we moved into new headquarters about 6 months ago because we had been sharing an office with Trello, and it was like, okay, it's time to grow up and get our own place. And we did an office, and we did design shared spaces really for the first time because we found people wanted to also have the mode of collaborating.
Yeah.
Like you need both. You need to be able to be like, right now I'm like heads down. I got to keep, like I got a lot in my head. I'm going to do this, and I need to be able to sit down and collaborate with teams that we didn't have when the company started. Like we literally, it was only a couple years ago that we had like our first marketing person, our first salesperson.
Wow.
Like we were one of those totally like all software, all coder all the time things. And that, I'm very like, I've done those jobs. Like I've been a marketer, I've been a salesperson in addition to having been a coder. And so I have a lot of respect for them. And so building the bridges between that was a lot of the work. But I really, I thought a lot about how do you evolve this culture and how do you hold on to the values of that, those early points about like treat people well, give them space, give them the tools, and then be critical. And what are the parts we're not going to hold on to where there aren't these arbitrary exclusionary hoops that people have to jump through, and where I think for quite some time, the company was, very white male oriented, and and Joel, Joel is probably one of the first and earliest and most prominent tech execs to be out, and he was like a cornerstone of, being, I think, giving visibility to gay and queer leaders in tech, not just like rank and file, but like you can be a CEO, you can be a voice and a face in the industry. And I think that's, I think that's helped us tremendously because it's like a strong signal of like, this is who we've been from day one. But still, there's the things you don't see. And I think those have been the parts that we have started, we've, I think, particularly accelerated the last several years in getting better at that. And then learn from our past successes and mistakes. So that's been a lot of it.
So Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people here have probably used Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
It's a really, really great, amazing resource to answer questions. But some of us are a little bit afraid of Stack Overflow as well.
Totally. Yeah.
It can be a little intimidating. It can be a little bit scary. So when you think about the lessons that you've learned and just what you've seen from that community, and how you've translated, hopefully taken some lessons learned into the new community that you've created, Glitch.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about Glitch first, and then tell us how that.
Yeah. So Glitch is something special. I'm so proud of it. It's a community where you use code to create what's in your heart, what's interesting to you, and that.
I love how sincerely you said that.
But I just.
I'm being
thank you. I just it's in many ways the culmination of what I've been trying to do my whole career, I think, and what I think many people on the team feel that way too, which is, you go to glitch.com and it's like almost like an app store. Like you can browse, you can try stuff out. And if you just want to find tools to use, that's like, this is a fun little art project or a VR experience or, some little app or game, that's fine. Like that, I think millions of people are going to do that, and that's going to be their experience at Glitch. For folks in this room, you click on remix or edit the code on any of those projects or view source. And all of a sudden what we're doing is we're cloning that app that's running. Most of them are Node, but you can use whatever tools you want. We drop you into an in-browser editor. You've got live, real-time, simultaneous code editing, so like Google Docs for editing code. And as you type, it deploys live. And that experience of like creating and just being able to type and see it light up and see it run. I had back in the very early days of the web, like you could FTP a page up. You could like view source on GeoCities or whatever, and you FTP a page up, and it was like, it lit up, and it felt good, and that was how I learned, taught myself front end and sort of scaled up in my skills, and I love the strength and the breadth of the tools we have now, and like, but I also know, like I've got a son, and so like I put him to bed, and then I've got like 2 hours where I can either like watch Netflix or I can just hack a little bit at night, right, before I have to go to bed. And my experience for the past several years had been, all right, it's time for me to update dependencies and set up my dev environment. Okay, I'm out of time, you know, and that was it. And it was like, but I have things I want to build and I have stuff I want to show. And it wasn't like, I appreciate the tools, but I don't want to be like wrangling my, you know, whatever, my AWS credentials, as opposed to like this idea that's in my head. And that's true at work too, but that was just my connection to it was in that moment. And to be able to sort of say, I'm going to start from something that works, remix it, and then just add the part that is this idea, this inspiration, this aha moment that I just had. That's what Glitch is all about. It's capturing that and then taking that all the way to a production app or taking it to work so your team can collaborate together. Like there's a lot of directions it can go. There's an incredible like technological innovation behind it, but the thing I'm really proud of is it's an incredible community. There is, and this is actually to contrast to Stack Overflow, there's no rep, there's no points. The only thing that has a metric on it in Glitch is, if you have an error, you get stuck in the editor, there's the little emoji of the person with their hand raised pops up and you click it and it'll say on the homepage, like, you know, Joe needs help, Jane, do you want to go in and help him? And then you click on the button and it'll take you into the editor in the same line of code with them and you're editing together instantly. And if you do that, they can thank you. And then your screen fills up with hearts, and then you get a little animation, and like then you have a thank. That idea of being thanked is the only thing we count on the site. So like the only game, insofar as there is any, the only thing you keep score on is like how many people did you help, and thanking is an explicit and visible action, and that's something that is it's just for me learning about what goes right and wrong on social networks for 20 years, and saying like we're not going to screw this up. And it's working. I mean, we've got, I don't know how, I guess I'm supposed to be like discreet about these things. We've got like almost 1 million projects on there. We've had 1.5 million devs come through. We came out of beta a month ago. It's working. And you know, the indications I have, we don't require login at all. Like you can build and ship and launch an app on Glitch without ever signing in. And we don't have like any tracking. I mean, Facebook is an optional sign in. I'm debating whether we should take it out, but like we don't have any real conventional tracking of stuff. So the trade-off in that is I don't know much about who uses it. I know there's people, but I don't know who they are. The indications I have is it's pretty good on gender, on race, on other forms of identity. We certainly, like, geographically, we know people around the world using it. And it is an interesting thing because all of the tools we talk about for like how to measure adoption, inclusion, all these things are dependent on tools of surveillance. And like, I don't want to put ads on this thing, and I don't want to send data out to the providers that know who is visiting the site. And so I'm trying to figure out how to solve that problem long term. But every indication we have is it's like a healthy community where people are safe, and we are super aggressive about keeping it that way.
So what I find so interesting about Glitch is, for most tech products, it's either really technical or very community driven. Like it's usually one or the other.
That's right.
But Glitch feels like it's doing both, and it's doing both really well. How do you get the community part? How do you make a really technical product feel like it's accessible and it's, you know, friendly to newbies and really warm?
I think the conventional wisdom is you have people that are very inexperienced with coding and very experienced, and then a mass in the middle, all of us that are sort of like somewhere in between. And you're supposed to target that middle, and then, like, I guess, I don't know, branch out from there. And I actually, I have a different view of how these things work. I think one, the completely new coder and the very, very experienced coder have very similar needs in that they want to create their idea, and they want to express themselves, and they're very motivated, and they don't want to mess around with the drudgery. Like the sort of grunt work. They want to get their idea out in the world. And so, you know, if you're very, very experienced, you have that, like, I know how to do that. I can do it. I don't feel like doing that right now because I have a bigger thing I want to express. And if you're new, you're like, I can learn how to do it, but first I want to see if what my idea is right. And so this sort of simpatico between people at the ends of the experience continuum is not intuitive and not obvious until you spend a lot of time talking to people. And the insight I came away with, and that the whole team really like lives in, is everybody's a newbie all the time, right? So, you know, if you are, if you
it
are,
says everyone's a code newbie.
Everyone's a code newbie. No, I mean, and you've informed us on this. Like so many people in the community that have thought about this deeply. You know, if you love coding, you're always learning that new framework, that new toolkit, that new API. And if you don't yet love coding, you just tried it out, you're learning those same things too. And so everybody we found that was passionate about code, whether they were starting, they've been doing it for decades, had this ethos in common. And so we sort of captured that part. And then we do a lot of design. Like I love, like Glitch is like way out there. Like people see it and they're like, this thing looks wild. Like it does not look, like, you know, it does not look like Emacs. And so I think that's that's also a fun part of it, is we're really strongly signaling like we are not trying to impress you with how technically clever we are. We know how to do this stuff. Like we've done this over and over and over. Like we made hits. You know, like there's no, like I don't have any insecurity about that. So
you've been on?
Yeah, we've been on. Like, I mean, come on. Like, I mean, really, if we're talking to coders and you're like, what is a company that has never taken VC, that's independent? Our team is less than 36 people.
Wow.
And matters in the world. Who else is there than us? And that's not on me, that's on the team. But like, there isn't anybody in our league. So like to know that and have that confidence, like I'm proud of the team for that. And I will I will rep them all day, but I don't have to prove that to anybody. And I got to walk into that and say, like, now what do we do? If we say that's where we start, now what do we do? The only worthy thing is to build the platform that fixes all the problems we all see in tech culture and coding culture.
So in abstracting away all the grunt work and stuff, I mean, it'd be great if we could just put ideas out there on our regular jobs, but working as developers, we have to do that grunt work. We have to do that drudgery, right?
Yeah.
And so do you ever worry about abstracting away too much, especially for newer developers, to the point where they think they can do more than they actually can?
What happens is the way people usually do that is they build these and I love a lot of the no-code movement and the tools that are being built, and anything that makes technology accessible, I'm in favor of. But what tends to happen is it happens at the cost of an abstraction that hides how it works.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. In Glitch, we have a version control tool called Rewind, which is we automatically, every Glitch project is a Git repo, and we automatically check in your code as you work. And if you have something you want to undo, there's just a little timeline slider, and you slide it back to 10 minutes ago or 2 days ago, and you're back at that version, and you can go from there. Which I say that like it didn't take us a year to build, but it did. And
just a button.
Yeah, and it's good. And so for X percent of the audience, for some large percent of the audience, that's going to be how they do it. And it's empowering because it means you can bring somebody into the team and let them start to hack on it without worrying about they're going to break something. But if you want to drop into the console and the terminal in Glitch and look at the history of the Git commits and use all the knowledge you have of using Git at the command line, you can do all that. So there isn't some we're going to hide there's only this candy coating or we're going to hide the guts of it. Like the substance is there as deep as you want to go. And that was how so many of us found the web and development in the first place, was this, okay, I got started and I got something that worked, and then this part caught my eye and I want to learn more about that and go deeper down the stack. So we want to keep both of those, and the apps are like totally standard Node, like there's nothing proprietary, nothing special about that. We're not obfuscating any of that. I think that balance, it's a really hard balance to strike, but we spent a lot of time practicing on how to do that. And I think that's something, I talk a lot about Glitch and it's our platform, but I think that's true across all of the tools we want to see succeed, is you have to be able to be very accessible and approachable, but not masking the ability to learn the underlying technology. And because every abstraction leaks, right? So how do you be able to go through and learn what's underneath?
Very nice. So I think we have time for a few questions from the audience. Do y'all have some things you want to ask Anil? Yes, no, maybe so?
Don't be shy.
Raise your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand. Up high, up high. Right there.
Would you recommend using Glitch with students perhaps that are still in elementary school, 6th, 7th, 8th, high school, or was it just for, what would you think about, as far as the private, that you caught my ear with the privacy thing?
Yeah.
I don't want to have my students use logins.
Yeah.
So
the question,
there's
questions, would we recommend using Glitch for junior high school age kids? Education is a primary audience we want to serve. We have multiple educators on the team that build Glitch. We are in schools all over the country and some around the world already. We want to enable that. One of my primary tasks I'm figuring out right now is we're building a Teams product. It's like take it to work and be able to collaborate on it. The reason we're building that business model is I don't want us to charge schools, like public schools, ever. And so we want to subsidize that, and so we're cautiously, we're advocating for it, and we're working with Mouse.org here in New York and other organizations that are building computer science curriculum around glitch, and we're fully going to support that. I'm deliberately taking it slow until we have a sustainability model where there's no tension between being able to subsidize kids using it. In terms of design, 100%. One of the main reasons we don't require login is so students can use it, and also just our views on surveillance in general and data tracking. The things kids are making. We got a 14-year-old kid in India, I forget what town he's in, that built an app like last week that like topped Product Hunt. And he was like, he sent us like an oh shit email, right? What just happened? And I was like, you made something great, and people want to see it. Like, it was really exciting. That kind of creativity we think is awesome. For learning, it's really great. One of the biggest things is being able to, because you can raise your hand and ask for help, and you can pair, even remotely, being able to sort of see the code and see the history and go that rewind and look back at like what's the mistake or the error you made and how did you fix it is just super, super powerful. So we think it's a great learning tool. And actually to the point of like everybody's a newbie, I think everybody loves to learn. Like the things that everybody's been getting wrong is learning is fun and learning to code is fun. And they sort of, they always are like trumpeting like don't learn to code. Like you don't have to learn to code to do this stuff. And it's like, that's the exact wrong lesson. Like learning is fun as hell. And kids know it. So yeah, and then the fact that it's like got bright, colorful fish on it and stuff, like kids are like, that's cool too.
Where did the fish come from?
There are many origin myths for the fish. I had said I'd preferred to have a logo that could be represented as an emoji. And there is a carp flag emoji for Children's Day in Japan that they made an emoji for, which is a day that parents go in and visit their kids at school and sort of see how they're learning, which was like very in keeping with Glitch. And more than one fish is a school, and we think that was kind of cool. And the one fish is a remix of the other fish, so that's like.
Look at that.
See,
levels.
It's got levels.
Levels.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very nice.
We're artists and shit.
Yeah. And shit. There you go. Question. Go ahead, you go first.
So, without user data to sell
Yeah.
or ads to show,
Yeah.
what are your plans on generating actual revenue with
Yeah, it's a good question. How are we going to sustain this thing? There's a couple sort of parallel paths. The first is we're going to make a Glitch for Teams product. We think this is actually going to be really handy for people at work. They're just like, we want to spin something up and get it running instantly. We're seeing in the teams we've been testing it with, there's like big name companies that are like, I can't get permission to actually deploy things on our production infrastructure, but if I just have a Glitch account and it's just up and running, all of a sudden everybody's using the tool. That's really handy. And also they're saying like, oh, our marketing team, we'll let them work on this because we can just undo what they mess up if they break something. And I say that as a marketer, it's all love. But I think there's like this like, that set of tools is really powerful. So we're going to build that out, and we're going to put I don't know, it'll be like Slack. You can pay a couple bucks a month for a person, and they'll be on the team and do it. I think that's pretty understandable. And never say never, but if we have our way, I'd rather never have advertising on the site at all. I can see people being able to do, like you've got an API you want to promote and you want to get in front of a lot of really interesting, engaged developers. Maybe we'll have a way to promote that there where that feels like that's valuable to the community and it's understandable and it's not about tracking your data. It's like, maybe you want to kick the tires on this thing. That feels like a slam dunk. Like it's valuable to everybody and it's understandable and the companies can get what you're doing and everybody wins. Like that's it for now, and then there's more stuff later that we can figure out.
Very cool. I think I have a question right there.
Will Glitch be a replacement for Stack Overflow?
Ooh.
Will Glitch be a replacement for Stack Overflow? They coexist. They have different, almost opposite problems that they solve. So Stack was designed to be a canonical resource, like almost in the abstract. And I actually look at like some of the criticisms of Stack Overflow is the hostility that people have had because they've sort of over-indexed on like no homework questions, no questions specific what you're doing. And I think, and one of the things I want to call out is I think it's been really productive and really effective for the critics that have raised those issues. Like I've been an advocate for those things on the board, but the more voices sort of say this hasn't been a welcoming place for me, the more effective that's been. So I'm happy for that. But that idea of like this is a canonical reference that is about this sort of isolated example of how to solve this class of problem. Stack is really great at that, and that's really good for conceptual documentation. Glitch is almost the opposite extreme, which is like it's all homework questions, right? Like you raise your hand and it's like this is just this app, and it has no applicability to anybody else's work. those are really complementary modes. So I think in a lot of ways, and also, you know, like you go to Glitch and it says like the friendly community where you'll build the app of your dreams, like on the homepage. Like that's probably also the opposite of Stack Overflow. And I think that like we want to fix those things. Like I'm not making light of the issue, but I think there's this like, there is a yin and a yang to that. And there are different modes of learning, real time versus like long term. And those and also running code versus like this sort of abstraction. But you know, one of the things I look at is like it's not at all hard to imagine embedding Glitch projects in the answer on a Stack Overflow question. They're very complementary.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Any in the back corner? I feel like I'm very biased in the center. Elizabeth, go ahead. Yeah.
All right.
Hi.
So something that you said, if we could just rewind,
Sure.
just broke my heart.
Okay.
And it's this idea that you were saying like, hey, I'm not good enough as a programmer to apply to.
That's how I felt. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also but hey, you know, as coders, we're always newbies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these two things are kind of at odds with each other.
Yeah.
And so what I want to ask is, now that you're CEO, Cloud Creek, you have an opportunity to
Yeah.
start creating abilities to be able to bring people in
Mhm.
that we think they're not good enough. Because I think that is related to why we don't see a lot of diversity in
Yep.
the coding community, not just in the tech world,
Yeah.
but the coding community.
100%.
So what are you doing to open up opportunities for all of us that are not good enough?
Right.
What
right.
you doing, Neil?
This is a great question. So speaking to, no, that's right. That's the whole thing, right? And I thank you for asking that question because that is like, it's the most important question I can answer, right? Which is, if I have, you know, I'm fortunate. I get to be a CEO. I have all the privileges you can have in the world, and I know acutely what it feels like to say, is what I am not good enough? It's not even about my skills, right? It's about like, does a person who has the skin color I has and has the background I has and comes from where I come from, can I be worthy, accepted in this place? And I take very seriously, one, like I'm in this seat, right? I got here, and so my presence has to mean something, right? That I got a little boy. I think about that every day. Like, what is he going to see me be? And I do have the power to change this organization, you know. So we've made a lot of changes, you know. And some of this is, to be clear, like this was in progress long before me. Like I'm not taking credit for this, but I'm able to accelerate this. You know, we got rid of the whiteboard interviews and
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we got, and I actually, I want to go into a little digression on that. Was like, they started because Joel Spolsky had said, like, I want to be able to like see how people think and capture it and not have them be worried about the trappings of like the dev environment and how things are running. So we'll just use this to take notes. And it became this ritual, especially in his absence. Like he went off to run Stack, and the industry sort of takes it and runs with it. And it becomes this like litmus test about like almost a hazing ritual, right? And if there's one thing I'm against in every industry, it's hazing rituals. And so to sort of say like, are we going to the spirit of this thing, the ethos of this thing, why it existed, or are we going to the ritual because we cleared this hurdle and this person has to do it too? And you know, one of the things I said to the team is, how many of you would pass this test now? You know, and it was not all the hands, right? And so you realize, well, why are you trying to put up a higher barrier than you had to cross to get in? And that's an interesting moment, right? And the team, to see people reflect, and also that they were engaged and excited and talking about that. I mean, that coding test is one example, but I think all those things fit together. And we've done a lot across the board. I mean, we've always had really people-centric, you know, policies around like benefits and all that kind of stuff. Be able to include and think that through, like that has to extend the whole way through the company. So we'd had a very clear compensation plans around technical roles, coding roles, and we did that across the company entirely. So we have, you know, salary transparency for all our roles. Like this is the spreadsheet, this is the roles you're in, this is the range it's going to be. Every job listing we have has a salary range. We talk about the criteria and what will determine your salary. That's another one of these signals. Like people are like, oh, how does that connect to code? It's like they're directly related. You have to have trust. So like, how do you get people that felt like this wasn't a place for them to feel like this might be a place for me? Is because we are going to be as open as we can be to establish that trust of saying like, you're going to be welcome here. And then I think talking about what our shortcomings have been. Like I'm under no illusions that we had been in an exclusionary environment. I don't excuse that, but I'm also not hiding from it. And to know that, and it's not just me, you know, A lot of you will know Jen Schiffer, who's our community engineer on Glitch. A lot of you might know Maurice Cherry, who heads up our sort of design evangelism for the team. Like, there's people who've done the work. And when, I think when people outside see people on our team who have done the work and been doing the work for years, it's much more credible for us to say we're trying to change and we're trying to evolve. And then some of it's reflection of myself, like what have been the times when I've not been critical enough about me and my choices and my leadership to say what you're doing is putting up walls and putting up barriers. And I think that's been, if it doesn't hurt, you aren't doing the work, right? And so I think that's been a lot of it. And that's a short answer to a large effort. But it's the top priority we do. And I think the biggest thing we see is the products, the work. Look at what we put out in the world and see what the business model is, what the funding model is, what the fundamental economics of it is, and what does success look like for that company. For every company, every technology you use, every tool you use, you say if their vision of the world works and they become the thing that everybody uses and that business succeeds at scale, what will it mean for me and my community and people who look like me and people who come from where I come from? And will it be good for us? Will we be brought along or not? And that's the whole game. Like that's the 50-year vision. And I think I hope people see what we're doing, and I hope that we are worthy of your trust.
Oh, that was such a good way to end. Can we give Anil a round of applause? Thank you so much. He's dropping everything. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.